For all cat lovers, it's a huge shock. There is probably nothing worse than the sudden and unexpected death of your own velvet paw. In this video, you can find out the reasons why sometimes a cat dies completely unexpectedly and out of the blue. 1. Kidney failure. If your cat suffers from kidney failure, it's a life-threatening disease, because it severely reduces the function of the kidneys or even causes them to fail completely. Toxins accumulate in the cat's body and can no longer be broken down, causing devastating damage. In the worst case, it can lead to multiple organ failure and the sudden death of the cat. That's why it's so important to recognize acute kidney failure and act as soon as possible. So don't hesitate if you notice symptoms such as fever, weakness, loss of appetite or vomiting and diarrhea in your cat. Although this can have many other causes, it's important to rule out fatal kidney failure with a vet. 2. Myocardial infarction. Unfortunately, the symptoms of heart disease in a cat do not appear until too late, making cardiovascular disease one of the most insidious in cats. In many cases, when it's finally discovered, it's usually too late, since the heart is already very weak and it's hardly possible to help the cat. If the heart disease goes undetected, in the worst case it will lead to heart failure and thus to the death of your cat. That's why it's especially important to take even your cat's most inconspicuous symptoms seriously. If you notice that your cat sleeps more and loses its spirit, these may be early signs of heart disease. Especially in older cats, cardiovascular diseases are more frequent, so it's advisable to have your cat's general health checked by your veterinarian on a regular basis. 3. Poisoning. A shock for every cat owner. You come home and find your cat on the floor, lifeless. When a cat dies suddenly, poisoning is one of the most common causes. Depending on the severity of the poisoning and the type of poison, the cat's life is in serious danger, so you must act immediately if you notice symptoms of poisoning in your cat, since it's the only way to save its life. If your cat is suddenly experiencing severe nausea with loss of saliva, vomiting and diarrhea, you should raise the alarm. Breathing difficulties or even shortness of breath are also signs of poisoning. In case of unconsciousness, paralysis, cramps or tremors, it's also necessary to go immediately to the vet, so that the cat can receive appropriate treatment. To avoid poisoning, be careful not to leave poisonous houseplants, food, or chemicals lying around the house. 4. A shock. If your kitty has had an accident at home, or even a car accident with you, it may be in shock. In many cases, this condition can be life-threatening, leading to acute circulatory failure. Your cat's major organs, such as the kidneys, heart, and brain, stop receiving enough blood, leading to certain death if left untreated. Many pet owners believe that if the cat is physically all right, it will be fine and they won't have to worry about its health. But this is far from the case. A cat that suffers a shock is in serious danger of death. In this state, it can die suddenly at any moment. During a state of shock, cats are often very calm and have shallow breathing. In addition, cats in shock feel very cold. Another sign is fading mucous membranes. If you observe these symptoms in your cat after an accident, take it to the vet immediately. 5. Allergic reaction. As a rule, an insect bite is not a problem for our velvet paws. However, in some cases there is great danger. Anaphylaxis after being stung by an insect, such as a bee or wasp, occurs particularly when the cat is stung in the throat or on tongue, as this can cause the cat's airways to swell dangerously and breathing to stop completely. Unfortunately, many owners don't realize their cat has been bitten by an insect because they are not around during the day, only to find their pet dead at home. Animals in the wild are in particular danger, as cats chase everything that moves. If upon returning home you find your cat with a swollen area, shortness of breath and difficulty swallowing, it may be suffering from anaphylaxis. Take your cat to the nearest vet or emergency clinic as quickly as possible, as this condition could be fatal. 6. Internal injuries. Another reason why cat owners suddenly find their pet dead are internal injuries, which often occur after an accident, for example when the cat has fallen. For you, as the owner, these injuries are very often not visible, so it's difficult to suspect them. For example, if you do nothing after your cat fell from a great height, you risk it suffering severe internal bleeding, which will go undetected. Since cats are very resilient, they don't show pain at first, making this type of injury even more insidious. In the event of an accident, keep a close eye on your cat, especially in the hours that follow, and go to the vet once rather than risk death. In particular, if your cat suffers respiratory distress after an accident and his mucous membranes fade, this is a sign of impending shock as a result of internal injuries. 7. Dehydration. If your cat suffers a significant loss of fluids due to permanent vomiting or diarrhea, dehydration will quickly occur which, under certain circumstances, can be life-threatening. If your cat's body loses too much water, it no longer has enough electrolytes, which are absolutely essential for its survival. As a consequence, your cat's body becomes increasingly dry and soon stops functioning properly. The kidneys will fail and death will be inevitable. Therefore, make sure your cat drinks enough water after a severe fluid loss. You can tell if your cat is already dehydrated, for example, if its skin doesn't recede or only recedes very slowly when you pull on it. This is a very critical condition and you should see a vet immediately, especially if diarrhea and vomiting won't stop. 8. Feline Cushing syndrome. This disease is completely unknown to many pet owners, although it is potentially fatal and can thus lead to sudden death if left untreated. It's a hormonal disease that mainly affects female cats, but also diabetic cats. Cats suffering from this disease permanently produce too much cortisol in their adrenal cortexes. As the disease is difficult or impossible to recognize, unfortunately, there are many deaths that could have been avoided. So, watch out for signs of illness in your kitty, such as increased thirst, increased food intake, weakness, and muscle atrophy. Gait disturbance and fur loss, especially around the belly, can also be signs of feline Cushing syndrome. If you have the slightest suspicion, you should consult a vet, who will initiate appropriate therapy. 9. Blood poisoning. Sometimes it's just a small wound, but it can have fatal consequences for your kitty. As soon as a wound becomes infected, bacteria can enter it. But pus-filled abscesses can also burst, and the pus and germs can get into your kitty's bloodstream. If your cat suddenly has a fever after an injury, stops eating and becomes listless, be alert. This could be the beginning of blood poisoning, which if left untreated will lead to death in a very short time, as the bacteria will affect all surrounding organs and cause multiple organ failure. Again, you must act as quickly as possible and take your cat to the nearest vet immediately, who will examine your cat and, in case of septicemia, will take the necessary life-saving measures. Many of the causes of sudden cat death listed here are, fortunately, very rare and often announced in advance. If you go to the vet as soon as you notice any changes in your cat and make sure your home is cat-proofed, there isn't much reason to assume your cat will die immediately, although there are never any guarantees. If you want to know more about how to recognize kidney failure in cats, click on the image on the left to go to our video on this topic. And, were you aware that you should also take your cat to the vet if you notice a weird smell coming from its mouth or fur? Click on the image on the right to find out what this could mean and why you should take immediate action.